How many of you remember being a teenager? Wonderful. Did your teen years bring back memories of acne, rebellion, and angst? Or was it dreams of the future, romantic crushes, and friendships for life? For me, growing up in the US as a daughter of immigrants, my adolescence was a combination of feeling that I could accomplish anything that I put my mind to, and feeling that I was an alien from an alternate planet with a really bad hairdo. Come on, just look at those bangs. I'm a pediatrician who is passionate about working with young people. In fact, when I was in medical school, I chose to work with young people because I felt there was a tremendous amount of hope, creativity, and energy. And I felt that if you could connect with a young person, get them to open up and talk about themselves, about their dreams for the future, you could really help to shape their life trajectory. Now, I've worked with young people over the last 20 years in many different settings and also counseled their parents. And that includes in many different places, including the military community in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, among the inner city and affluent communities of Washington, D.C., and even among the high-rises and the bustling cities of Washington and Hong Kong, China. And I can tell you that adolescence is a really critical time. It is a time where so many important concepts like self-esteem and the ability to handle life's challenges develop. I will also tell you that many people think of adolescence like a black box, that it's hard to really know what's going on inside. And in fact, working with the teens, sometimes you think, what really is there? It's a mystery. It's really hard to know and understand. And I will tell you, having worked with young people all over the globe, that adolescence is a universal experience. All of us have gone through adolescence and have the same developmental stages and the same basic needs. And I'm here to help you to uncover and to open up that black box and to really understand how we can help young people to become happy, healthy, and confident adults. And I'm going to outline 3 steps in order to how we can accomplish that. So what exactly is adolescence? Well, the World Health Organization defines adolescence as ages 10 through 20 years of age. And adolescence comes from the Latin word adolescere, which means to grow up. Now, puberty comes from the Latin word pubescere, which means to grow hairy. And if you think about puberty, you get hairy in lots and lots of funny places. Now, during adolescence, you probably know teenagers, there's a lot of changes that are happening both physically and also psychologically. And there's a lot of experimentation and testing that's going on. Now, one of my favorite stories involving a teenager and testing happens to do with one of my young patients in Washington, D.C. Now, this story happened many years ago, and it's with a young boy who I'm going to call Bob. Now, Bob went to the zoo, and he decided that he saw a snake at the zoo and that he wanted to take the snake home as a pet. So somehow Bob managed to break into the cage, get the snake, and it turned out to be a highly poisonous snake, and he put the snake into a bag. And then because he had to go home, he got on the public bus. Now, all was fine. This is a true story. All was fine until he had to switch buses, at which point he swung the bag over his back, and guess what? The snake bit Bob on the back. Now, again, being a highly poisonous snake, this didn't make Bob feel so well, and he ended up in the hospital, in our hospital, in the intensive care unit, receiving anti-venom therapy. So now you're probably asking, why on earth would someone go to the zoo and try to take a poisonous snake home in a bag? And I would probably say that a lot has to do with the developing teen brain. And in fact, there's been some really amazing studies that have to do with what's happening in the brain and some of the impulsive behavior that occurs during the brain. And there's wonderful MRIs that show some of the changes that are occurring from ages 5 all the way to 25 years of age. And believe it or not, the teen brain is only 80% as developed as the adult brain. I show this picture to young people and I say, when you're sometimes doing funny things, you can blame your brain for some of those impulsive decisions because the brain is really a work in progress. And it'll sometimes help you as adults to also understand why teens do what they do, maybe even doing things like stealing poisonous snakes and putting them in a bag. So one thing I'd like to highlight is that the prefrontal cortex, which is located right here, is a decision-making part of the brain. It's what helps people to make decisions and also helps them against impulsive behavior. And believe it or not, the prefrontal cortex is not completely developed until later, almost closer to the 20s. Whereas the limbic system during adolescence is what has to do with pleasure seeking and sensation. And the limbic system is much more developed than the prefrontal cortex. So in fact, a lot of adolescence is the fact that the desire to seek stimulation is much stronger than the ability to inhibit impulses and those type of things. So what do we do when we have a young person that's going through all of these changes? How do we help them? How do we really handle that? Well, I will tell you that in many cases, adults want to treat teenagers like children and would like to overprotect them, or they go to the other extreme and they treat them as though that they are adults and give them too much freedom. And I'm here to tell you that adolescence is a very important transition time, and we need to handle that balance very delicately. And we need to make sure that we give them both the freedom to do things, but also to provide them the guidance that they really need. So what I'd like to share with you today is the fact that there are 3 steps that I believe will help young people to really become happy, healthy, and confident adults. Now, the very first step that I believe is allowing experimenting, but providing boundaries. So Susie was one of my 16-year-old patients in a military community. And Susie, like many young girls, went to a party on a Friday night. And at the party, Susie drank a beer. And then she had another beer and another beer. One of her friends was trying a new pill, a new kind of drug that would make her feel good. So Susie tried that as well. And a few hours into the party, Susie wasn't feeling so well. She was feeling dizzy. She looked pale. In fact, she was barely conscious. Her friends got very worried, and they brought Susie back to her parents' home, and they told her parents that she had been drinking heavily and been using drugs. Now, her parents brought her to our emergency room, and she was determined to have a very high blood alcohol content. The following day, when Susie was feeling better, her parents told her that they loved her very much, and they were so glad she was doing better. But they also told her that they were very concerned that she had been drinking and using drugs, and that they thought it put her in a very vulnerable place, and they really wanted to make sure that she got help and guidance for that. So what was Susie doing? She was experimenting. As we know from the teen brain, there's a lot of experimentation that occurs. And I will tell you also that experimentation is a very important part of adolescent behavior, because if we don't try and fail, we don't really learn how to handle life's challenges. So allowing experimenting, allowing testing, and allowing young people to fail and problem solve is a very important part of identity formation. In fact, if our ancestors did not try new foods or hunt new things or go to new places, we wouldn't be here. So parents, allow your teenagers to try and to test. Now, I'll also say that sometimes experimentation puts us in vulnerable places, whether it's with alcohol or with drugs or with sex. And that's where boundaries and expectations are really important. So set curfews. Tell young people that sexting is not appropriate, or that drinking and driving puts them in a tough place. So my first rule, again, is to allow experimentation, but provide boundaries. My second step is to identify unique abilities. So Queenie was one of my 16-year-old patients in Hong Kong. And Queenie lived with her mother that was a single mother in public housing who was barely trying to make ends meet. Queenie struggled with obesity and poor self-image. When I first met Queenie, she could barely look me in the eye. She was sad. She wore baggy clothes. Now, when I meet young people, one of the things I ask them is, what are their strengths? What are they good at? And I also ask them what their dreams are for the future. And Queenie told me when I asked her what she wanted to be, she said, I want to be a fashion designer. So I said, really, well, do you keep some sketches or drawings? Yes, she said. So we continued with the discussion. At the very end, I wrote in my discharge instructions, bring in your sketchbook. Well, the second time I saw Queenie, she hadn't lost much weight. But when we came to the part about her sketches, she showed me her drawings, and she became so animated when we talked about her drawings and about the designs that she had. And we joked that maybe she could design a gown for me. And I told her she had talent, and I told her that she needed to look into drawing classes, and I told her mother to invest in a sewing machine. By the third time that Queenie came in to see me, she had lost weight. She wore bright clothing. She looked excited. And more importantly, she brought in the pictures of the dolls and the dresses she had sewn for her dolls from scraps of material. So what am I trying to say with Queenie? I think we need to identify unique abilities, because when we do, we empower young people and we cultivate their passions, and that self-esteem starts very early in life. And self-esteem is our body's armor against life's challenges. And when we develop self-esteem, we can protect against so many other issues that happen in adolescence, whether it's peer pressure or depression or eating disorders. So my second step is to identify unique abilities. My third and final step is to maintain open communication. Now, Anil was a 17-year-old patient from an Indian community. And Anil had received a lot of pressure growing up to do well academically. And in fact, his parents told him that they wanted him to go to an engineering school, one of the top engineering schools. Well, Anil had just received the results of his examinations, and he hadn't done as well as he had expected. And recently he had become more withdrawn, isolated, didn't really want to spend time with his family, was playing a lot of video games. Probably one of the most challenging things for a parent to do is to have to work with a young person that's angry or sullen or doesn't want to communicate. And I would probably say that trying to keep that communication open and trying in many different ways and settings is really important. And it could be during a family mealtime, during an activity, but really trying to keep getting at the root of what the issue might be. Now, a lot of what I do with young people, if they don't want to talk, is to ask what their friends are doing, because so much of what a young person is doing is reflected by what their friends are doing. Now, when I was speaking with Anil, he told me that he was feeling down and depressed, and he felt that he couldn't really meet his parents' expectations. And I will also say that he mentioned that when he was stressed, that he actually would play the guitar. One of the other things that we need to do is to equip young people with the ways to handle stressors. So whether it's playing the guitar or exercise or mindfulness or yoga, these are all wonderful ways to handle stressors. So my third and final point is to keep the lines of communication open, to equip young people to handle stress, and to really try to get to the root of the problem. So I will say that adolescence is a really fascinating time. It's so critical in terms of development of self-esteem and our ability to really handle life's challenges. It's a bit like a caterpillar metamorphosing into a beautiful butterfly. Now, through the 3 steps that I've outlined, which is to allow experimentation, but to provide boundaries, to identify unique abilities, and to keep the lines of communication open, I truly believe we can help our young people to become happy, healthy, and confident adults. That is my idea word spreading.